Hey everyone, welcome to the story. I'm your narrator, Jacob. I'm really glad you're here tonight. Now before we begin, I want you to take a breath and just settle in. Because the story you're about to hear didn't start with anything unusual. Just an ordinary moment on an ordinary day. And sometimes, that's exactly how the worst things begin. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's step into tonight's story. This story is collected from a private source. December 18th, 2022, 11:47 p.m. It was one of the coldest nights that winter. The kind of night where your breath fogged up the windshield from the inside, and even the sound of tires crunching against asphalt seemed to echo too loudly. Snowflakes fell like ashes in the wind, melting instantly on contact with the warm hood of the engine. Most people were tucked in at home, heaters humming, unaware of what the road had in store for someone working the night shift. James Carter, better known around town as Jimmy, was 41, a seasoned ambulance driver in Monroe County, Tennessee. He'd been driving for over 18 years. Heart attacks, highway crashes, psychiatric runs, he'd seen it all. He was good at his job. Kept his head down, didn't ask too many questions. That night, though, was different. At exactly 11:47 p.m., Jimmy received a call from dispatch. A transfer request came from a medical center on the south end of Knoxville. A body needed to be transported to a rural village about 200 miles away through mostly forest highway and narrow mountain passes. Patient is deceased, the dispatcher had said casually. You'll be accompanied by the brother of the deceased. His name is Thomas Hill. Nothing about the call raised alarms. Just a routine cold transfer. Except for the timing. Middle of the night, almost 200 miles one way, and just one family member tagging along. Still, Jimmy took the keys from the board, warmed up the rig, and drove out. The hospital looked half abandoned. Only the emergency entrance had lights on. A tall man in a black hoodie stood near the loading ramp, puffing on a cigarette with trembling hands. You Jimmy? The man asked. Yeah. You must be Thomas. He nodded and crushed the cigarette underfoot. She's inside. They just finished the paperwork. Can we go soon? Jimmy looked him over. Pale, eyes sunken, but composed enough. Yeah, we'll load her up and get going. The corpse was that of a young woman, Emily Hill, age 26. Cause of death, suicide by hanging. Found in her apartment 3 days prior. No foul play suspected. They secured the body bag in the rear compartment. Thomas sat in the passenger seat beside Jimmy. He didn't say much. Just stared at the dashboard with glassy eyes. By 1:35 a.m., they were on the road. The city lights faded behind them as they merged onto Highway 68, a long, twisting stretch of asphalt cutting through Tennessee woodlands and forgotten towns. The roads were dry despite the snowfall, and the stars shimmered faintly above the tree line. At first, the drive was smooth. Thomas drifted in and out of sleep. Jimmy kept the radio low and hummed along to some late-night blues. Then, something changed. At exactly 3:12 a.m., Jimmy felt a strange tug in the engine. He looked at the speedometer, it read 110 miles per hour. But outside, it felt like they were barely doing 30. The trees weren't zipping past. Even the wind noise had dropped. He pressed the gas harder. No change. He leaned forward, frowning. Weird, he muttered. Thomas sat upright suddenly. Did you hear that? What? But before Jimmy could finish the question, a soft, echoing weep floated through the air, like it was coming from somewhere behind them. The kind of cry that carried grief too old to understand. It wasn't loud. Just close. Jimmy glanced at the rearview mirror. Nothing. He turned to Thomas. Maybe it's the wind. No, Thomas said firmly. That's her. Jimmy's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, her? Thomas looked down. Emily. She always cried like that when she had a panic attack. I'd know it anywhere. Jimmy went quiet. He checked the rearview mirror again. Still nothing. But the air felt heavier now, thicker. He turned off the radio. Silence poured in like water. That's when the heater cut off. The temperature dropped instantly. Jimmy rubbed his hands, confused. Great, he muttered. Everything's falling apart tonight. But Thomas wasn't listening. He was staring out the passenger side window, pale as chalk. There's someone running. What? There's someone behind us. Jimmy flicked the mirror toward the rear window and froze. A shadow. Not a person, not exactly. It was tall, unnaturally tall. It ran not on the road but alongside it, slightly above the ground. It had long, claw-like fingers and hair that twisted in the wind like ink in water. Its mouth hung open in a soundless scream. It was keeping pace with them. Jimmy swerved slightly, panicking. What the hell is that? Thomas gripped the dash. Don't stop. Don't stop, no matter what. The figure began to get closer. Each time the ambulance slowed on a curve, the shadow gained on them. Its eyes glowed faintly in the side mirror, two dim orbs of rotting amber. Jimmy slammed the pedal to the floor. This time, the engine roared. The ambulance jolted like it had broken free from something. The trees blurred past again, headlights flashing against signposts and snowbanks. The heater came back on. The shadow disappeared. They pulled into a closed-down gas station, the kind with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. Jimmy needed to check the tires. He was sure he'd felt something dragging under the vehicle. He stepped out, flashlight in hand. Everything looked fine. No punctures. No leaks. Nothing unusual. Except there were long scratch marks on the back doors. Like fingers had clawed at the metal, trying to get in or out. He ran a hand along the marks. They weren't from the road. They were deliberate. He got back into the cab, visibly shaken. Thomas whispered, "She's not at peace." Jimmy turned. "What are you talking about?" "She didn't just kill herself," Thomas said, voice barely audible. She was hearing voices. Said something followed her home from the woods near our old family cabin. Said it promised her peace if she just gave up. He wiped his face. She said it was tall, black, with no mouth, but it screamed. Jimmy didn't respond, just shifted into drive and kept going. The last 60 miles to Whitlow Ridge ran through a narrow forest path with no lights and no towns. It was known for deer crossings and the occasional landslide. Cell service? Non-existent. Around mile marker 48, they hit a sudden fog bank. The world turned white and gray, shadows bleeding through the mist like ghosts behind frosted glass. That's when the siren started. The ambulance siren. Jimmy hadn't turned it on. It wailed, low, eerie, then suddenly rose into a pitch no siren should reach. The interior lights blinked. The body bag in the back began to move slightly, like something shifted inside it. Jimmy slammed the brakes. The siren died. The lights went out. For 5 seconds, there was nothing. Not even the engine. Just darkness and breath. Then, softly, Something knocked from inside the storage compartment. Jimmy turned, eyes wide. "She's gone," Thomas whispered. "She's in here now." The back door creaked. And in the mirror, she stood. Hair matted, eyes white, rope burns along her neck. A grotesque smile twisting her lips. She stared at Jimmy, mouthing something he couldn't hear, then vanished like smoke blown in the wind. They arrived just after 6 a.m. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the village chapel's lanterns were lit. An old man stood waiting outside with 2 others. As they unloaded the body, Jimmy noticed the marks on the bag, bloody handprints that hadn't been there before. The priest refused to let the body into the chapel until sunrise. When Jimmy asked why, the priest just said she brought something back with her. Jimmy and Thomas waited in silence until dawn. As the first light hit the hills, a single raven flew over the trees and vanished into the fog. January 3rd, 2023. Jimmy took a leave of absence. 2 weeks later, the priest was found dead in his quarters, eyes open, mouth stretched in horror, hands clawing at his own throat. There were deep scratch marks on the chapel doors. The locals sealed the family grave where Emily was buried, then blessed it with salt and fire. But at night, they still say you can hear the siren, far off in the trees, rising too high, then fading to a weep. Jimmy never drove again at night. And the claw marks? Still on the back of that ambulance. That was the chilling story of the last ride, a horrifying account that many believe truly happened on a cold December night in Tennessee. Now, let's talk about what might really have been going on here. First off, everything about this transport seemed routine on the surface. A young woman who died by suicide, a grieving brother, and a late-night transfer to a remote village. But as we've seen, what should have been a simple trip turned into a paranormal nightmare. Some believe Emily didn't die alone. Thomas mentioned that she had been hearing voices and claimed something followed her from the woods near their family cabin. Could this be what's commonly known as a forest entity or spirit of despair? There are legends in southern Appalachian folklore that talk about the screamer, a spirit that attaches itself to those suffering from deep emotional pain, feeding off their grief and pushing them towards self-destruction. Many believe this entity doesn't stop after death, it follows. The haunting during the trip supports this. The heavy vehicle, the false speed readings, the crying sounds, and of course, the terrifying figure running alongside the ambulance, it all aligns with the idea that something had latched on, trying to make sure Emily wasn't alone in death. But what really makes this story disturbing is what happened after the body arrived at the chapel. The bloody handprints, the death of the priest, and the recurring scratch marks, they all suggest that whatever haunted Emily during her life and death didn't end with her burial. Could it have transferred to someone else? Jimmy, the driver, took leave immediately after. Did it follow him? Or was it waiting for the next grieving soul to cling to? And what about the unexplainable siren and the flickering lights? Those mechanical malfunctions timed perfectly with supernatural occurrences. Many EMTs and ambulance drivers report similar stories during late-night runs, especially involving trauma or suicides. What if the entity wasn't haunting Emily? What if it was Emily? Some spiritual beliefs suggest that when someone dies in immense suffering or emotional turmoil, their spirit can become corrupted, not evil, but lost, caught in a state between life and death, trying to communicate or find closure. That might explain why she appeared in the mirror, why her crying echoed through the fog, and why she seemed to show up only when the ambulance crossed into those isolated roads. One more thing to think about is the raven flying away at dawn. In many cultures, ravens symbolize the soul's departure or a message from the other side. Was it a sign that Emily was finally freed? Or was it the entity leaving to look for someone else? And that's where tonight's story ends. But maybe it doesn't really end there. Because the scariest part about stories like this isn't what happened. It's knowing it could happen again. What do you think really happened that night? Was it a haunting? A cursed spirit? Or just a man's mind playing tricks on him after years on the job? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've ever experienced something strange on the road, especially in the dead of night, share your story. You might not be alone. If this story gave you chills, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I upload new stories every week. I'm Jacob, and until next time, keep the lights low and your doors locked.